Hello, this is Daniel and welcome to the next part of the character modeling tutorial. Today we'll look at how to make these here. So I have struggled a little bit by making these on my first try, so I took a while and made them while not recording so that I could really figure out something good. And I think I'm going to continue with these, but we will but I'm going to use these, so this model will be the one that I'm probably going to leave in the final result, but we're going in this video through everything once again. So I'm just going to hide this layer and we're going to make everything from scratch. So you can really follow along and see how I made it. Yeah, a few things I want to mention here. If you remember, we still have a copy of this on the third layer, and I like to keep my files really clean, and I quickly want to talk about this. So I create new versions. So you see this is already my 5th version, and in the fourth version I made sure that this part is saved. In the 5th version I'm going to delete it, simply because if we're going to need it, we'll take it from the past version, and this file will stay clean. So if any new temporary mesh will come up in the 5th version, I'm going to jump into the 6th version, leave it in the 5th version, and delete it from the 6th version. But that's just how I like to do things, and I wanted to tell you in case you want to follow that. So now it's time for these. I'm going to start by creating a circle once again, and I'll give it a 12 vertices. Now in edit mode, I'm going to move them quickly to the side so that I can add a modifier. First of all, a mirror modifier, and we'll also need a the subdivision surface modifier. Now, one thing you should be aware of is that in my reference, the leg was kind of bent a little bit. So what it did was I selected here 2 loops, and I activated proportional editing, so I moved them from around here to here. So you might want to follow that example if you have the same problem. If you don't do that, it will be kind of hard to model this over it without making it look weird. So let's go back to our object. Where did we put it again? There should be this circle somewhere here. Oh, there it is. So with that selected in edit mode, now let's start modeling. I'll just roughly capture the entire leg like this. Make sure it covers it, it's not somewhere underneath. Yeah, that's good. And then I'm going to extrude it downwards until I reach this point. And then I'm just adjusting it from both directions. Now you see this is kind of dark and looks wrong, so the normals are again facing inwards. So select the entire thing, and with Control N you can fix the normals. And that's that. So next thing we want to do is to add more details. So I'm making a subdivision and moving it to here, because until here it looks good. Now here we need to move this a little bit back. Maybe we'll just scale it along Y and reduce the size along X. And just bring it correctly into place. And then we'll add a few more loops here so that we have things to work with. I'm just going to smooth everything now and scale it up again. That's just the technique I use to keep things smooth for a while at least, and it works pretty well for me. So that's the basic structure that we start out with. With that, we're going to make all the basic wrinkles and do some more things. But first of all, let's take a look at. No, let's do that later. Actually, let's move some. Let's make some wrinkles. So take a look at the position of the knee, and you see that there is, of course, the knee is kind of this bump. And below such a bump, you always have like a big fold that continues downwards. So I'm going to try to create that. The folds that we want to create in this piece of cloth are those that are the most common ones. So you have a variety of possibilities how the pants could be bent, and all these things. So you have to decide on which pose you want to make the folds for. And the best way to do it is to make the folds so that they fit as many poses as possible. And usually the character will be standing or running or walking, and the places that we select for what we want to do are those that are always kind of affected. So one of those areas is of course the knee area, and you can see me already focusing some of the vertices back here so that we can create a fold. And to be honest, I would not recommend to go into too much detail at the moment, because it's better if you model it with a few polygons, and if you want more detail, subdivide it with multi-res modifier later on and sculpt the details. I think you'll be more successful that way, or else you'll have trouble to keep things smooth and nice. Yeah, so you can see here at the reference, it doesn't tell us much, just that we have a rather tight looking design for the upper part, and then it's getting more loose down here. So trying to follow that example, I'm trying to bring this a bit closer to the skin. So that looks pretty good. And down here, we're now going to continue. Now we want a couple of changes here. You want to give it a few dents down here, basically. That's the most you can do with these few amounts of vertices. And again, for more detail, look into sculpting. But even without sculpting, this might be already enough of detail, since you actually don't want to have too much, because the more details you have, the more defined your wrinkles are, and the more you're forced to stay in the certain pose that the wrinkles are designed for. So it might not even be a big advantage to get too detailed. Which doesn't mean though that you can do it if you do it right. And down here I'm going to move this a bit more back, since we're kind of getting wider and then narrower again, but that's not really how it looks like to me on the reference. But now I'm rather happy with it. So let's create now these borders on the side. I'm going to select here this area and just extrude it downwards for now, and adjust it a little bit, give it some variation so that it looks a bit more like cloth. You can also create a wrinkle down here. And then you can also do smoothing with the vertex smooth tool. Until you're satisfied with the result. And that's really just the basic shape of that. Now up here we'll do some basically the same thing. Just going to select this area, move it up. You just have to create a little bit of a slope here, because that's how design is made. With that done, let's now create the borders really, since we actually left them out still. We just created this green area. And I do that by simply extruding it. So I'm extruding this to here, then deselecting this area, moving it a bit towards here, or actually we should deselect this one as well. and then move it a bit to the side. That way you have a loop around here, and that's again as we did with the other part, the cloth. So far we need these kind of loops along any seam. That's really important. And I'm going to make a loop cut here and another loop cut, and this one is going to be scaled down a little bit along X and Y. You can scale along two axes at the same time by pressing S for scale and then Shift and X, Y, or Z, depending on which one you do not want to use. So for scaling along X and Y, I use Shift and Z. For some reason, not all the keys show up here, by the way. So don't rely too much on that, if possible. Yeah, that looks kind of right to me. It's the same thing down here. I hope I'm not getting too thick. So first of all, I'm going to move downwards, then I'm deselecting all the ones that are already correct in place. That would be all these ones. And for these two, I just have to move them a little bit to the side. So that's that. Since we don't want intersections, let's do a quick correction. Just be careful not to make it too smooth over here. We need this to be rather close. Well, no, I mean it should be even. We don't want it to deform too much. That's what I was wanting to say. And then I'll add a loop cut here just so that we have a little bit of detail. And then again, loop cut, another loop cut, and this time let's just use shrink and fatten to scale it inwards. Now to sharpen these edges, I'm just going to add a loop here and one over here. And to prevent this from being sharpened too much, just move this loop to somewhere around here to get things even and spread. And that looks pretty good. Up here, what we could do is just add a loop here. That's good. You just have this slope as we have it in the design. If you want this to be sharp as well, you could actually just add it here. Another one, and similar to what we did below, do this. Alright, now to really connect it to the leg, we're just going to use a solid fill modifier. And now we have some thickness. And if you move a loop close to this edge, it will look even more solid. But that's actually just a matter of shading, so if you were to 3D print it, that wouldn't have been necessary, but it wouldn't hurt as well. So I'm doing a quick comparison to my other model, just wondering about how different it ended up to be. Well, anyways, here we have two different versions. It could look like this or like that. Let's quickly apply materials just for fun. So I'm going to select this entire loop by Alt right clicking this loop, and then select loop in a region after Control E to enter the menu. Then with Shift select this other loop, Shift and Alt, and then again Control E. Oh well, that is not going to work properly. Oh, it did work. Perfect. So I just did the same thing again. So we have now these two areas, and then go to the materials. We want to have two materials. Assign these two rims to the second slot. In the first one, I'm going to select color 1. I have called them, in a weird way. It's not important. Let's just check if these are the ones we used up here as well. Yeah, great. And there's just a little problem with. Oh, it seems like we had some not selected. So make sure that everything was really selected. So check the borders everywhere, and it looks good. So first part is done. Next up is this part on the side, and for that I'll start out by copying maybe this part here, just to have some geometry. By the way, here's a little arrow. select this part and assign it. So I'm selecting these 5 now and copying them and separating them into a new object so that I can begin to do the same thing again, just a different place. So here it's kind of a corner, and then I'm going to extrude all of them upwards and rotate them a little bit, and now position them to their destination. We can again use the snapping tools where the magnet is to position them right on the surface, which we want in this case. Then we can add loops and move them outwards a little bit to bend this part. So I'm doing that twice or thrice, depending on what's needed. So we don't need the snapping tool anymore at this point. So I'm turning it off. And that looks pretty good. Now you may want to add details, like here there is a little some little details in there. So you could, recreate that and give this a little bit of a corner shape, or just make it a little wider, depending on what you want. I also found that it was interesting if you gave it a little bit of a wave here, so as if that piece of fabric was bent and it kind of created this big fold that shows you that this is kind of a tough material, something like that. Great. Now again, a similar situation as before. We need to subdivide these, and I included already the border, so this time we need to do it a bit different. By the way, I'm kind of unhappy with the position of this still, so moving it a little bit to the front. Yeah, just adjust those positions the way you like them. Since I have it already, I'm kind of being a bit lazy here. But it's the same thing that I did, and over here as well. So now, to create that same kind of loop that goes around it, I will just merge these into the last one. So the corner. And, oh, that was wrong. Because of that, we also end up with that same kind of loop that we are always looking for. Up here, we don't need to do it because, well, this is kind of the ending and we don't need it to go around. In fact, we do want it to go straight into there. You can also bevel this edge to sharpen this corner, and if you don't want this to be sharp, which wouldn't be that bad actually since it looks kind of good, but let's remove the edge. You can do that by moving those apart. Now you can make a loop cut here and make another one and move it inwards, and then make it so that this is selected, and assign it to this material. And then just one more thing that you have to do is making all these edges evenly thick, and at this point you also want it to be a bit sharper. This point is kind of too thin, so do that by hand and go through all these points and fix these things. And then if you move another edge close to the border, you get everything a bit sharper. And we're done with that as well. Great. Now one quick easy thing, I'm just going to select these 3 loops, and I'm copying them and separating them into a new object. The material that I'll assign to it is the same dark one as here. Then in edit mode, just use shrink and fat. Oh, actually, you don't even need to do that. Just apply a solid fill modifier to it and make it a bit thicker. And set this to 0. By setting this to 0, you extrude into both directions, and that means that you're inside as well as outside. So there's definitely this will definitely look like it's tight on the leg. So I'm moving these loops to the sides just to make it look more solid once again. And there we are. Now since this is kind of looking like it's turned downwards, I want to raise this part at the back just a little bit and lower this one. Be careful not to intersect with the leg itself too much. You have a little bit of possible error that wouldn't matter, but just be careful. Over here you could also fix some things. And there we go. Looks pretty good. The very last thing are these 3 buttons. I'm doing that by simply just copying this one to over here, separating it into a new object, and then without proportion editing, move them to over here, rotate them until they kind of show into the same direction as the surface, and scale them down since they're quite small, not as big as the ones above. And then make a copy. Make sure you adjust it individually and make a 3rd copy and do the same thing. And that's up to you to adjust size and position. Everything is possible. Awesome, we are done with this piece of cloth, and I can now compare it to what I originally made. So I'm going to move all of these to the 3rd layer, and everything that I made, I'm going to move it to the 4th layer, and now I can kind of cycle through. So this is my version. So I think I made this a bit thicker, and I kind of like that. This is the version we modeled this time. It looks a bit different. I can't decide at all. There are kind of things that I like about this one, and some others that I like about this one. I might just leave both versions until we have to decide later on. Yeah, but now you have an example of how different things can turn out if you try again. But I'm happy with both of these. So this one is a little bit sharper. If you want to achieve that, basically create another loop that goes through here and move it down here. Oh, that was my version. Oh, I see. So maybe that one has some cool things about. Okay, you know what? Let me just stop here. I'm going to decide myself someone. But this is how it looks, and I hope you also are able to achieve something similar. Thanks for watching as always, and I hope to see you again in the next part. Have a good day. Bye bye.